Hi. Hello. Making some minor adjustments. Things feel wonky and I'm not really sure why. Um, Hi, baby girl. So, I'm so glad you guys are here. It has been so cold and I am going a little stir crazy. You guys probably are too. Um, um, yeah. So, some things have changed since last week, but we are still here together. We will maintain our consistency with each other. We have a Velma in the room. Hopefully, she will just lay down here in a minute and go to sleep. Um, we are finishing up Murders in the Rue Morgue tonight, and we kind of got through all of the really dry stuff last week. So tonight will be Dupin going through his thought process. So he is a character who is similar to Sherlock Holmes, but more in the like entitled smart guy way, is how I would describe him. There may be people who go, feel free to disagree in the chat. Um, Sorry, I'm feeling a little bit scattered at the moment, and I'm not really sure why. I was feeling pretty confident getting stuff set up, but mm, listen, sir, check out the comments of your Facebook post because I found it. I found it. And we might make time. But it's the tune of 9 to 5. So if anybody was like, actually adept at playing the guitar and wanted to check out Tell the Fox's Facebook post for tonight, in the comments is what would be the first verse of the song. So if we've got 10 on right now, if all 10 of you stay for the rest of this story, I will sing it. I will sing live on YouTube. Hello. Exactly, Ashley. If only we knew someone that played the guitar. Okay, well, we have the whole rest of this story for somebody to volunteer. I'll probably sing it. Who am I kidding? Come on, how fair is that? All right, all 10 people don't have to stay. Look, some people got worried. They were like, we got to keep it below 10. I'll sing for you guys at the end of the story. Listen, I love you guys. I'll sing for you. Oh, I can't think of anyone either. Oh. Okay, anyway, so to catch you guys up, if you missed the first 10 minutes, Katie Singer, I will sing for you, my love, my sister, my dearest friend. I will sing for you. But yeah, so we got through all of the like backstory. And the newspaper reporting of the two murders, they were pretty grisly. So you guys can read back over it. There's probably going to be another account or some more description in here. So if you missed that last week, pause here, go watch last week's, come back, and join us. And it will be at the like 5:05-ish mark. You can pick back up on the story. Excuse me. So we have a mommy drink in my my Hocus Pocus cup. I can't believe this thing has held up as well as it has. A student made this for me back in like 2021 maybe? 2020? I'm not really sure, but it was right around there. So anyway, we are picking up with the conversation between our narrator and Monsieur Dupin. Dupin seemed singularly interested in the progress of this affair. At least so I judged from his manner, for he made no comments. It was only after the announcement that Le Bon had been imprisoned that he asked me my opinion regarding the murders. I could merely agree with all Paris in considering them an insoluble mystery. I saw no means by which it would be possible to trace the murderer. We must not judge of the means, said Dupin, by this shell of an examination. The Parisian police, so much extolled for acumen, are cunning, but no more. There's no method in their proceedings beyond the method of the moment. They make a vast parade of measures, but not unfrequently these are so ill adapted to the objects proposed as to put us in mind of Monsieur Jourdain's calling for his robe de chambre, pour men entendre la musique. The results attained by them are not unfrequently surprising, but for the most part are brought about by simple diligence and activity. When these qualities are unavailing, their schemes fail, Vidocq. Their schemes fail. Vidocq, for example, was a good guesser and a persevering man. But without educated thought, he erred continually by the very intensity of his investigations. He impaired his vision by holding the object too close. He might see, perhaps, one or two points with unusual clearness, but in so doing, he necessarily lost sight of the matter as a whole. Thus, there is such a thing as being too profound. Truth is not always in a well. In fact, as regards the more important knowledge, I do believe that she is invariably superficial. The depth lies in the valleys where we seek her, and not upon the mountaintops where she is found. Hey, Velma. Psst, psst. Hi. Can you just lay down? I love you. Thank you. Sorry, she's still trying to warm back up. The modes and sources of this kind of error are well typified in the contemplation of the heavenly bodies. To look at a star by glances, to view it in a sidelong way by turning toward it in the exterior portions of the retina, more susceptible of a feeble impressions of light than the interior, is to behold the star distinctly, is to have the best appreciation of its luster, a luster which grows dim just in proportion as we turn our vision fully upon it. A greater number of rays actually fall upon the eye in the latter case, but in the former, there is the more refined capacity for comprehension. By undue profundity, we perplex and enfeeble thought, and it is possible to make even Venus herself vanish from the firmament by a scrutiny too sustained, too concentrated, or too direct. Pardon me for just a moment. Vilma, 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 you get to go play with Roxy now. And go play with Roxy now. Thank you. Good girl. Okay, it's just us again. Um, one moment, one more time. Set the book down, couldn't find it. Sorry. Hi, hello again. Okay. So, yes, looking at things too intensely and too directly. As for these murders, let us enter into some examinations for ourselves before we make up an opinion respecting them. An inquiry will afford us amusement. I thought this an odd term, so applied, but said nothing. And besides, Laban once rendered me a service for which I am not ungrateful. We will go and see the premises with our own eyes. I know G, the prefect of police, and shall have no difficulty in obtaining the necessary permission. The permission was obtained, and we proceeded at once to the Rue Morgue. This is one of those miserable thoroughfares which intervene between the Rue Richelieu and the Rue Saint Roch. It was late in the afternoon when we reached it, as this quarter is at a great distance from that in which we resided. Excuse me. The house was readily found, for there were still many persons gazing up at the closed shutters with an objectless curiosity from the opposite side of the way. It was an ordinary Parisian house with a gateway, on one side of which was a glazed watchbox with a sliding panel in the window, indicating a loge de concierge. Before going in, we walked up the street, turned down an alley, and then, again turning, passed in the rear of the building. Dupin, meanwhile, examining the whole neighborhood, as well as the house, with a minuteness of attention for which I could see no possible object. Well, no. If you could see the object, everyone else could too. Let's just leave it to our friend to figure out what's going on, and then he'll tell us. Excuse me. Retracing our steps, we came again to the front of the dwelling, rang, and having shown our credentials, were admitted by the agents in charge. We went upstairs, into the chamber where the body of Mademoiselle L'Espagne had been found, and where both the deceased still lay. Ooh, still lay the next day? Well, I guess I didn't have photographs. I would have had to leave the bodies to keep examining. Stinky, though. The disorders of the room had, as usual, been suffered to exist. I said nothing beyond what had been stated in the Gazette. Dupin scrutinized. I saw nothing beyond what had been stated in the Gazette. Dupin scrutinized everything, not excepting the bodies of the victims. Of course not. They're there. You gotta look. We then went into the other rooms and into the yard, a gendarme accompanying us throughout. The examination occupied us until dark, when we took our departure. On our way home, my companion stepped in for a moment at the office of one of the daily papers. I have said that the whims of my friend were manifold. And, sorry guys, I gotta move a light. I'm having a hard time reading these little letters. So, there we go. It was his humor now to decline all conversation on the subject of the murder until about noon the next day. He then asked me, suddenly, if I had observed anything peculiar at the scene of the atrocity. Just one thing? last one. There was something in his manner of emphasizing the word peculiar, which caused me to shudder without knowing why. No, nothing peculiar, I said. Nothing more, at least, than we both saw stated in the paper. The Gazette, he replied, has not entered, I fear, into the unusual horror of the thing. But dismiss the idle opinions of this print. It appears to me that this mystery is considered insoluble, for the very reason which should have caused it to be regarded as easy of solution. I mean, for the outre character of its features. The police are confounded by the scheming absence of motive, not for the murder itself, but for the atrocity of the murder. They are puzzled, too, by the seeming impossibility of reconciling the voices heard in contention with the facts that no one was discovered upstairs but the assassinated mademoiselle, and that there were no means of egress without the notice of the party ascending. The wild disorder of the room, the corpse's thrust with the head downward up the chimney, the frightful mutilation of the body of the old lady, these considerations, with those just mentioned, and others which I need not mention, have suffered to paralyze the powers by putting completely at fault the boasted acumen of the government agents. They have fallen into the gross but common error of confounding the unusual with the abstruse. But it is by these deviations from the plane of the ordinary that reason feels its way, if at all, in its search for the true. An investigation such as we are now pursuing should not be so much asked what has occurred as what has occurred that has never occurred before. In fact, the facility with which I shall arrive, or have arrived, at the solution of this mystery is in the direct ratio of its apparent insolubility in the eyes of the police. I stared at the speaker in mute astonishment. I am now awaiting, continued he, looking toward the door of our apartment. I am now awaiting a person who, although perhaps not the perpetrator of these butcheries, must have been in some measure implicated in their perpetration. Of the worst portion of the crimes committed, it is probable that he is innocent. I hope that I am right in this supposition, for upon it I build my expectation of reading the entire riddle. I look for the man here, in this room, every moment. It is true that he may not arrive, but the probability is that he will. Should he come, it will be necessary to detain him. Here are pistols, and we both know how to use them when the occasion demands their use. Took the pistols, scarcely knowing what I did or believing what I heard, while Dupin went on, very much as if in a soliloquy. I have already spoken of his abstract manner at such times. His discourse was addressed to myself, but his voice, although by no means loud, had that intonation which is commonly employed in speaking to someone at a great distance. His eyes, vacant in expression, regarded only the wall. Gonna get another drink, guys. Take a little drink yourselves. We gotta it's very exciting. That the voices heard in contention, he said, by the party upon the stairs, were not the voices of the women themselves, was fully proven by the evidence. This relieves us of all doubt upon the question whether the old lady could have first destroyed the daughter and afterward have committed suicide. I speak of this point chiefly for the sake of method, for the strength of Madame would have been utterly unequal to the task of thrusting her daughter's corpse up the chimney as it was found, and the nature of the wounds upon her own person entirely preclude the idea of self-destruction. Yeah. Ooh, you'd have to really want to do it be able to decapitate yourself. Oh, that's a rabbit hole we don't have time to go down tonight. Oh, no. Murder, then, has been committed by some third party, and the voices of this third party were those heard in contention. Let me now advert, not to the whole testimony respecting these voices, but to what was peculiar in that testimony. Did you observe anything peculiar about it? I remarked that while all the witnesses agreed in supposing the gruff voice as to be that of a Frenchman, there was much disagreement in regard to the shrill, or as one individual termed it, the harsh voice. Yep. That was the evidence itself, said Dupin. But it was not the peculiarity of the evidence. You have observed nothing distinctive, yet there was something to be observed. The witnesses, as you remark, agreed about the gruff voice. They were here unanimous. But in regard to the shrill voice, the peculiarity is not that they disagreed, but that while an Italian, an Englishman, a Spaniard, a Hollander, and a Frenchman attempted to describe it, each one spoke of it as that of a foreigner. Each assured that it was not the voice of one of his own countrymen. Each likens it not to the voice of an individual of any nation with whose language he is conversant, but the converse. The Frenchman supposes it the voice of a Spaniard, and might have distinguished some of the words had he been acquainted with the Spanish. The Dutchman maintains it to have been that of a Frenchman, but we find stated that, not understanding French, this witness was examined through an interpreter. The Englishman thinks that it is the voice of a German, and does not understand German. The Spaniard is sure that it was that of an Englishman, but judges by the intonation altogether, as he has no knowledge of the English. The Italian believes it is the voice of a Russian, but has never conversed with a native of Russia. A second Frenchman differs, moreover, with the first, and is positive that the voice is that of an Italian, but, not being cognizant of that tongue, is, like the Spaniard, convinced by the intonation. Now, how strangely unusual must that voice have been, about which such testimony as this could have been elicited, in whose tones even denizens of the five great divisions of Europe could recognize nothing familiar. Now, you will say that it might have been the voice of an Asiatic, of an African. Neither Asiatics nor Africans abound in Paris, but without denying the inference, I will merely call your attention to 3 points. The voice is termed by one witness harsh rather than shrill. It is represented by 2 others to have been quick and unequal. No words, no sounds resembling words, were by any witness mentioned as distinguishable. I know not, continued Dupin, what impression I may have made so far upon your own understanding, but I do not hesitate to say that legitimate deductions, even from this portion of the testimony, the portion respecting the gruff and shrill voices, are in themselves sufficient to engender a suspicion which should give direction to all farther progress in the investigation of the mystery. I said legitimate deductions, but my meaning is not thus fully expressed. I design to imply that the deductions are the sole proper ones, and that the suspicion arises inevitably from them as a single result. What the suspicion suspicion is, however, I will not say just yet. I merely wish to give you to bear in mind that with myself it was sufficiently forcible to give a definite form, a certain tendency, to my inquiries in the chamber. Let us now transport ourselves, in fancy, to this chamber. What shall we first seek here? The means of egress employed by the murderers. It is not too much to say that neither of us believe in the preternatural events. The ladies were not destroyed by spirits. The doors of the deed were material and escaped materially. But how? Fortunately, there is but one mode of reasoning upon the point, and that mode must lead us to a definite decision. Let us examine, each by each, the possible means of egress. It is clear that the assassins were in the room where Mademoiselle was found, or at least in the room adjoining, when the party ascended the stairs. It is then only from these two apartments that we have to seek issues. The police have laid bare the floors, the ceilings, and the masonry of the walls in every direction. No secret issues could have escaped their vigilance. But not trusting to their eyes, I examined with my own. There were then no secret issues. When I say there are no secret issues, that means there are none. Dupin, Poirot, Holmes, all of them. Just a little cocky. Both doors leading from the rooms into the passage were securely locked with the keys inside. Let us turn to the chimneys. These, although of ordinary width for some 8 or 10 feet above the hearths, will not admit, throughout their extent, the body of a large cat. The impossibility of egress, by means already stated, being thus absolute, we are reduced to the windows. Through those of the front room, no one could have escaped without notice from the crowd of the street. The murderers must have passed then through those of the back room. Now, brought to this conclusion, in so unequivocal a manner as we are, it is not our part as reasoners to reject it on account of apparent impossibilities. It is only left for us to prove that these apparent impossibilities are, in reality, not such. All right. There are 2 windows in the chamber. One of them is unobstructed by furniture and is wholly visible. The lower portion of the other is hidden from view by the head of the unwieldy bedstead, which is thrust close up against it. Okay, I can picture that. The former was found securely fastened from within. It resisted the utmost force of those who endeavored to raise it. A large gimlet hole had been pierced in its frame to the left, and a very stout nail was found fitted therein, nearly to the head. Okay, so it's nailed shut. Upon examining the other window, a similar nail was seen similarly fitted in it, and a vigorous attempt to raise the sash failed also. Okay. The police were now entirely satisfied that egress had not been in these directions, and therefore it was thought a matter of supererogation to withdraw the nails and open the windows. My own examination was somewhat more particular, and was so for the reason I have just given. Because here it was, I knew that all apparent impossibilities must be proved to not be so in reality. I proceeded to think thus. The murderers did escape from one of these windows. This being so, They could not have refastened the sashes from the inside, as they were found fastened, the consideration which put to a stop, through its obviousness, to the scrutiny of the police in this quarter. Yet the sashes were fastened. They must, then, have the power of refastening themselves. Ooh, I don't remember. I'm ever reading this again, because I don't remember how they did this. There was no escape from this conclusion. I stepped to the unobstructed casement, withdrew the nail with some difficulty, and attempted to raise the sash. It resisted all my efforts, as I had anticipated. A concealed spring must, I now know, exist, and this corroboration of my idea convinced me that my premises, at least, were correct. However mysterious still appeared the circumstances attending the nails. A careful search soon brought to light the hidden spring. I pressed it, and satisfied with the discovery, forbore to upraise the sash. Okay, hidden springs, all kinds of goodies. I now replaced the nail and regarded it attentively. A person passing out through this window might have reclosed it, and the spring would have caught, but the nail could not have been replaced. The conclusion was plain, and again narrowed in the field of my investigations. The assassins must have escaped through the other window. Supposing, then, the springs upon each sash to be the same, as was probable, there must be found a difference between the nails, or at least between the modes of their fixture. Getting upon the sacking of the bedstead, I looked over the headboard minutely at the second casement. Passing my hand down behind the board, I readily discovered and pressed the spring, which was, as I had supposed, identical in character with its neighbor. I now looked at the nail. It was as stout as the other, and apparently fitted in the same manner, driven in nearly up to the head. You will say that I was puzzled, but if you think so, you must have misunderstood the nature of the inductions. To use a sporting phrase, I had not been once at fault. The scent had never for an instant been lost. There was no flaw in any link of the chain. I had traced the secret to its ultimate result, and that result was the nail. It had, I say, in every respect, the appearance of its fellow at the other window. But this fact was an absolute nullity, conclusive as it might seem to be, when compared with the consideration that here, at this point, terminated the clue. There must be something wrong, I said, about the nail. I touched it, and the head, with about 1/4 of an inch of the shank, came off in my fingers. The rest of the shank was in the gimlet hole where it had been broken off. The fracture was an old one, for its edges were encrusted with rust, and had apparently been accomplished by the blow of a hammer, which had partially embedded, in the top of the bottom sash, the head portion of the nail. Excuse me. I now carefully replaced this head portion in the indentation whence I had taken it, and the resemblance to a perfect nail was complete. The fissure was invisible. Pressing the spring, I gently raised the sash for a few inches. The head went up with it, remaining firm in its bed. I closed the window, and the semblance of the whole nail was again perfect. Aha. The riddle, so far, was now unriddled. The assassin had escaped through the window which looked upon the bed. Dropping of its own accord upon his exit, or perhaps purposely closed, it had become fastened by the spring, and it was the retention of the spring which had been mistaken by the police for that of the nail, farther inquiry being thus considered unnecessary. Yeah, why would they think to look for hidden springs and hidden openings and whatnots? Just, the police. The next question was that of the mode of the descent. Upon this point, I had been satisfied in my walk with you around the building. About 5.5 feet from the casement in question, there runs a lightning rod. From this rod, it would have been impossible for anyone to reach the window itself, to say nothing of entering it. I observed, however, that the shutters of the fourth story were of the peculiar kind called by Parisian carpenters ferrade, a kind of rarely employed at the present day, but frequently seen upon very old mansions at Lyons and Bordeaux. They are in the form of an ordinary door, a single, not a folding door, except that the upper half is latticed or worked in open trellis, thus affording an excellent hold for the hands. Yep. In the present instance, these shutters are fully 3.5 feet broad. When we saw them from the rear of the house, they were both about half open. That is to say, they stood off at right angles from the wall. It is probable that the police, as well as myself, examined the back of the tenement, but if so, in looking at the ferrade in the line of their breadth, as they must have done, they did not perceive this great breadth itself, or at all events, failed to take it into due consideration. In fact, having once satisfied themselves that no egress could have been made in this quarter, they would naturally bestow here a very cursory examination. It was clear to me, however, of course, it was clear to him, that the shutter belonging to the window at the head of the bed would, if swung fully back to the wall, reach to within 2 feet of the lightning rod. It was also evident that, by exertion of a very unusual degree of activity and courage, an entrance into the window from the rod might have been thus effected. By reaching to the distance of 2.5 feet, we now suppose that the shutter opened to its whole extent, a robber might have taken a firm grasp upon the trellis work. Letting go, then, his hold upon the rod, placing his feet securely against the wall, and springing boldly from it, he might have swung the shutter so as to close it, and if we imagine the window open at the time, might have even swung himself into the room. So yeah, if it was warm and she opened her window, now some of you know this story, so you know how this ends. But I'm trying to remember from the first time I read this if I guessed what it was, what had happened. I don't think I did. Oh, excuse me, guys. All right. We still got a ways to go. We might have to turn this into a 3-parter. Oh, no. Okay. I wish you to bear especially in mind that I have spoken of a very unusual degree of activity as requisite to success in so hazardous and so difficult a feat. It is my design to show you, first, that the thing might possibly have been accomplished. But secondly and chiefly, I wish to impress upon your understanding the very extraordinary, the almost preternatural character of that agility which could have accomplished it. You will say, no doubt, using the language of the law, that to make out my case, I should rather undervalue than insist upon a full estimation of the activity required in this matter. That may be the practice in law, But it is not the usage of reason. My ultimate object is only the truth. My immediate purpose is to lead you to place in juxtaposition that very unusual activity of which I have just spoken, with that very peculiar, shrill, or harsh and unequal voice, about whose nationality no two persons could be found to agree, and whose utterance no syllabification could be detected. At these words, a vague and half-formed conception of the meaning of Dupin flitted over my mind. I seemed to be upon the verge of comprehension without power to comprehend, as men, at times, find themselves on the brink of remembrance without being able, in the end, to remember. My friend went on with his discourse. You will see, said he, that I have shifted the question from the mode of egress to that of ingress. It was my design to convey the idea that both were affected in the same manner, at the same point. Let us now revert to the interior of the room. Let us survey the appearances here. The drawers of the bureau, it is said, had been rifled, although many articles of apparel still remained within them. The conclusion here is absurd. It is a mere guess, a very silly one, and no more. How are we to know that the articles found in the drawers were not all these drawers had originally contained? Madame and her daughter lived an exceedingly retired life, saw no company, seldom went out, had little use for newer changes of habiliment. Yeah. Those found were at least of as good quality as any likely to be possessed by these ladies. Sorry, guys, I am having a hard time catching my breath. If a thief had taken any, why did he not take the best? Why did he not take all? In a word, why did he abandon 4,000 francs in gold to encumber himself with a bundle of linen? The gold was abandoned. Nearly the whole sum mentioned by Monsieur Mignot, the banker, was discovered in bags upon the floor. I wish you, therefore, to discard from your thoughts the blundering idea of motive engendered in the brain of the police by that portion of the evidence which speaks of money delivered at the house. Yeah. Okay. Coincidences 10 times as remarkable as this, the delivery of the money and murder committed within 3 days of the party receiving it, happen to all of us every hour of our lives, without attracting even momentary notice. Coincidences, in general, are great stumbling blocks in the way of that class of thinkers who have been educated to know nothing of the theory of probabilities, that theory to which the most glorious objects of human research are indebted for the most glorious of illustration. In the present instance, had the gold been gone, the fact of its delivery 3 days before would have formed something more than a coincidence. It would have been corroborative to this idea of motive. But, under the real circumstances of the case, if we are to suppose gold the motive of this outrage, we must also imagine the perpetrator so vacillating an idiot as to have abandoned his gold and his motive together. Keeping now steadily in mind the points to which I have drawn your attention, that peculiar voice, the unusual agility, and that startling absence of motive in a murder so singularly atrocious as this, let us glance at the butchery itself. Here is a woman strangled to death by manual strength and thrust up a chimney head downward. Ordinary assassins employ no such modes of murder as this. Least of all do they thus dispose of the murdered. In the manner of thrusting the corpse up the chimney, you will admit that there was something excessive, something altogether irreconcilable with our common notions of human action, even when we suppose the actors the most depraved of men. Yeah, you'd think after what they did, they'd just be like, and she's done. Bye. Think too, how great must have been that strength which could have thrust the body up such an aperture so forcibly that the united vigor of several persons was found barely sufficient to drag it down. I forgot. It took several people to pull her out of the chimney. Mm. Mm. Turning now to other indications of the employment of a vigor most marvelous. On the hearth were thick tresses, very thick tresses, of gray human hair. These had been torn out by the roots. You are aware of the great force necessary in tearing thus from the head even 20 or 30 hairs together. You saw the locks in question as well as myself. Their roots, a hideous sight, were clotted with fragments of the flesh of the scalp, sure token of the prodigious power which had been exerted in uprooting perhaps 500,000 of hairs at a time. The throat of the old lady was not merely cut, but the head absolutely severed from the body. The instrument was a mere razor. I wish you also to look upon the brutal ferocity of these deeds. Of the bruises upon the body of Madame, I do not speak. Monsieur Dumas and his worthy coadjutor, no, and his worthy coadjutor, Monsieur Etienne, have pronounced that they were inflicted by some obtuse instrument. And so far, these gentlemen are very correct. The obtuse instrument was clearly the stone pavement in the yard, upon which the victim had fallen from the window which looked in upon the bed. Ooh. Oh, I forgot about that. Okay. Sorry, guys. Let's read together. This idea, however simple it may now seem, escaped the police for the same reason that the breadth of the shutters escaped them. Because by the affair of the nails, their perceptions had been hermetically sealed against the possibility of the windows having ever been opened at all. If now, in addition to all these things, you have properly reflected upon the odd disorder of the chamber, we've gone so far as to combine the ideas of an agility astounding, a strength superhuman, a ferocity brutal, a butchery without motive, a grotesquerie and horror absolutely alien from humanity, and a voice foreign in tone to the ears of men of many nations, and devoid of all distinct or intelligible syllabification. What result, then, has ensued? What impression have I made upon your fancy? I felt a creeping of the flesh as Dupin asked me the question. A madman, I said, has done this deed. Some raving maniac escaped from a neighboring maison de santé. Oh. In some respects, he replied, your idea is not irrelevant. But the voices of madmen, even in their wildest paroxysms, are never found to tally with that peculiar voice heard upon the stairs. Madmen are of some nation, and their language, however incoherent in its words, has always the coherence of syllabification. Besides, the hair of a madman is not such as I now hold in my hand. I disentangled this little tuft from the rigidly clutched fingers of Madame. Tell me what you make of it. Dupin, I said, completely unnerved, this hair is most unusual. This is no human hair. I have not asserted that it is, said he. But before we decide upon this point, I wish you to glance at the little sketch I have traced upon this paper. It is a facsimile drawing of what has been described in one portion of the testimony as dark bruises and deep indentations of fingernails upon the throat of Mademoiselle, and in another, by Messieurs Dumas and Etienne, as a series of livid spots, evidently the impression of fingers. I can make a hat. I can make a brooch. I can make a pterodactyl. Okay. I expect all of those things in the space. I do. Maybe not a pterodactyl, a dragon. Dragons over dinosaurs any day. Dragons are better than dinosaurs. You will perceive, continued my friend, spreading out the paper upon the table before us, that this drawing gives the idea of a firm and fixed hold. There's no slipping apparent. Each finger has retained, possibly until the death of the victim, the fearful grasp by which it originally embedded itself. Attempt now to place all your fingers at the same time in the respective impressions as you see them. I made the attempt in vain. We are possibly not giving this matter a fair trial, he said. The paper is spread out on a plain surface, but the human throat is cylindrical. Here's a billet of wood, the circumference of which is about that of the throat. Wrap the drawing around it and try the experiment again. Don't they have the bodies? Can't they just be like, is your hand this big? I don't know, maybe it's been 3 days. Yeah, that might be a bit much. I did so, but the difficulty was even more obvious than before. This, I said, is the mark of no human hand. Read now, replied Dupin, this passage from Cuvier. It was a minute anatomical and generally descriptive account of the large fulvous orangutan of the East Indian Islands. The gigantic stature, the prodigious strength and activity, the wild ferocity, and the imitative propensities of these mammalia are sufficiently well known to all. I understood the full horror of the murders at once. The description of the digits, said I, as I made an end of the reading, is in exact accordance with this drawing. I see that no animal but an orangutan of the species here mentioned could have impressed the indentations as you have traced them. This tuft of tawny hair, too, is identical in character with that of the beast of Cuvier. But I cannot possibly comprehend the particulars of this frightful mystery. Besides, there were two voices heard here in contention, and one of them was unquestionably the voice of a Frenchman. True. And you will remember an expression attributed almost unanimously by the evidence to this voice. The expression, Mon Dieu. This, under those circumstances, has been justly characterized by one of the witnesses, Montani, the confectioner, as an expression of remonstrance or expostulation. Upon these two words, therefore, I have mainly built my hopes of a full solution of the riddle. A Frenchman was cognizant of the murder. It is possible, indeed, it is far more than probable, that he was innocent of all participation in the bloody transactions which took place. The orangutan may have escaped from him. He may have traced it to the chamber, but under the agitating circumstances which ensued, he could not have recaptured it. It is still at large. I will not pursue these guesses, for I have no right to call them more, since the shades of reflection upon which they are based are scarcely of sufficient depth to be appreciable by my own intellect, and since I could not pretend to make them intelligible to the understanding of another. We will call them guesses then, and speak of them as such. If the Frenchman in question is indeed, as I suppose, innocent of this atrocity, this advertisement which I left last night upon a return home at the office of Le Monde, a paper devoted to the shipping interest and much sought by sailors, will bring him to our residence. He handed me a paper, and I read thus: Caught in the Bois de Boulogne early in the morning of the morning of the murder. A very large tawny orangutan of the Burmese species. The owner, who was ascertained to be a sailor belonging to a Maltese vessel, may have the animal again upon identifying it satisfactorily and paying a few charges arising from its capture and keeping. Call at number blank, Rue blank, à Soissons. How is it possible, I asked, that you should know the man to be a sailor and belonging to a Maltese vessel? I do not know it, said Dupin. I am not sure of it. Here, however, is a small piece of ribbon, from which its form and from its greasy appearance has evidently been used in tying the hair in one of those long queues of which sailors are so fond. Moreover, this knot is one which few besides sailors can tie, and is peculiar to the Maltese. I picked the ribbon up at the foot of the lightning rod. It could not have belonged to either of the deceased. It was pretty gross. Hey, the 13th Archangel. Hello. Now, if after all I am wrong in my induction from this ribbon that the Frenchman was a sailor belonging to a Maltese vessel, still I have done no harm in saying what I did in the advertisement. If I am in error, he will merely suppose that I have been misled by some circumstance into which he will not take the trouble to inquire. But if I'm right, a great point is gained. Cognizant, although innocent of the murder, the Frenchman will naturally hesitate about replying to the advertisement, about demanding the orangutan. He will reason thus: I am innocent. I am poor. My orangutan is of great value. To one in my circumstance of fortune of itself, why should I lose it through idle apprehensions of danger? Here it is, within my grasp. It was found in the Bois de Boulogne, at a vast distance from the scene of that butchery. How can it ever be suspected that a brute beast should have done the deed? The police are at fault. They have failed to procure the slightest clue. Should they even trace the animal, it would be impossible to prove me cognizant of the murder, or to implicate me in guilt on account of that cognizance. Above all, I am known. The advertiser designates me as the possessor of the beast. I am not sure to what limit his knowledge may extend. Should I avoid claiming a property of so great a value, which it is known that I possess, I will render the animal at least liable to suspicion. It is not my policy to attract attention either to myself or to the beast. I will answer the advertisement, get the orangutan, and keep it close until this matter is blown over. It might work. Oh. Okay, we're getting close. We're gonna go long tonight, but we're getting close. At this moment, we heard a step upon the stairs. Be ready, said Dupin, with your pistols, but neither use them nor show them until a signal from myself. Okay. Oh no, I can't shoot my gun until you tell me. Oh, no. The front door of the house had been left open, and the visitor had entered without ringing and advanced several steps upon the staircase. Now, however, he seemed to hesitate. Presently, we heard him descending. Dupin was moving quickly to the door when we again heard him coming up. He did not turn back a second time, but stepped up with decision and rapped at the door of our chamber. Come in, said Dupin in a cheerful and hearty tone. A man entered. He was a sailor, evidently, a tall, stout, and muscular-looking person, with a certain daredevil expression of countenance, not altogether unprepossessing. His face, greatly sunburned, was more than half hidden by whisker and mustachio. He had with him a huge oaken cudgel, but appeared to be otherwise unarmed. He bowed awkwardly and bade us a good evening in French accents, which, although somewhat Neuchâtelish, were sufficiently indicative of a Parisian origin. Sit down, my friend, said Dupin. I suppose you've called about the orangutan. Upon my word, I almost envy you the possession of him. A remarkably fine and no doubt a very valuable animal. How old do you suppose him to be? The sailor drew a long breath, with the air of a man relieved of some intolerable burden, and then replied in an assured tone, I have no way of telling, but he can't be more than 4 or 5 years old. Have you got him here? Oh, no, we have no conveniences for keeping him here. He is at a livery stable in the Rue Morgue just by. You can get him in the morning. Of course, you are prepared to identify the property. To be sure I am, sir. I shall be sorry to part with him, said Dupin. I don't mean that you should be at all this trouble for nothing, sir, said the man. Couldn't expect it. I'm very willing to pay a reward for the finding of the animal. That is to say, anything in reason. Well, replied my friend, that is all very fair, to be sure. Let me think. What should I have? Oh, I will tell you. My reward shall be this. You shall give me all the information in your power about these murders in the Rue Morgue. Dupin said the last words in a very low tone, very quietly. Just as quietly, too, he walked toward the door, locked it, and put the key in his pocket. He then drew a pistol from his bosom and placed it, without the least hurry, upon the table. The sailor's face flushed up as if he were struggling with suffocation. He started to his feet and grasped his cudgel, but the next moment he fell back into his seat, trembling violently and with the countenance of death itself. He spoke not a word. I pitied him from the bottom of my heart. My friend, said Dupin in a kind tone, you are alarming yourself unnecessarily. You are indeed. We mean you no harm whatever. I pledge you the honor of a gentleman and that of a Frenchman that we intend you no injury. I perfectly well know that you are innocent of the atrocities in the Rue Morgue. It will not do, however, to deny that you are in some measure implicated in them. From what I have already said, you must know that I have had means of information about this matter, means of which you could never have dreamed. Now, the thing stands thus: you have done nothing which you could have avoided, nothing certainly which renders you culpable. You were not even guilty of robbery when you might have robbed with impunity. You have nothing to conceal. You have no reason for concealment. On the other hand, you are bound by every principle of honor to confess all you know. An innocent man is now imprisoned, charged with that crime of which you can point out the perpetrator. The sailor had recovered his presence of mind in a great measure while Dupin uttered these words, but his original boldness of bearing was all gone. So help me God, he said after a brief pause. I will tell you all I know about this affair, but I do not expect you to believe one half I say. I would be a fool indeed if I did. Still, I am innocent, and I will make a clean breast if I die for it. What he stated was, in substance, this: he had lately made a voyage to the Indian archipelago. A party, of which he formed one, landed at Borneo and passed into the interior on an excursion of pleasure. Himself and a companion had captured the orangutan. This companion dying, the animal fell into his own exclusive possession. It's brave to hold on to it. I don't know what you do with it or where you keep it. After great trouble, occasioned by the intractable ferocity of his captive during the home voyage, he at length succeeded in lodging it safely at his own residence in Paris, where, not to attract toward himself the unpleasant curiosity of his neighbors, he kept it carefully secluded, until such time as it should recover from a wound in the foot received from a splinter on board ship. His ultimate design was to sell it. Oh, the poor little thing got a little splinter in his little orangutan pad. They have like toes though. Ooh. Yeah. Poor baby. Baby. It's an orangutan. I know. I know. But those of us that have been to the Fort Wayne Children's Zoo, we've seen the little baby orangutan. It was so cute. So cute. Returning home from some sailor's frolic the night, or rather in the morning of the murder, he found the beast occupying his own bedroom, into which it had broken from a closet adjoining, where it had been, or was thought, securely confined. On my heart, so cute. I know, Karen, you know the baby. Remember when they had the first baby? When we were just like little children? I didn't make it in 25. And I can't remember if I went 24. I'm sure I went 24. But I need another zoo trip. Desperately. Oh. Razor in hand and fully lathered, it was sitting before a looking glass, attempting the operation of shaving, in which it had no doubt previously watched its master through the keyhole of the closet. Terrified at the sight of so dangerous a weapon in the possession of an animal so ferocious, and so well able to use it, the man, for some moments, was at a loss what to do. I'm sorry, I'm just, oh, it's like, long day today. Happy to be home. What? What? You'd think you'd gone crazy for a second. Be like, okay, this is the day the orangutan escapes with a razor. Oh my goodness. Okay. He had been accustomed, however, to quiet the creature, even if it in its fiercest moods, by the use of a whip, and to this he now resorted. Yes, it didn't work. Upon sight of it, the orangutan sprang at once through the door of the chamber, down the stairs, and thence through the window, unfortunately open, into the street. The Frenchman followed in despair. The ape, razor still in hand, occasionally stopping to look back and gesticulate at its pursuer until the latter had nearly come upon it. It then again made off. Oh, like a puppy with your slipper. In this manner, the chase continued for a long time. The streets were profoundly quiet, as it was nearly 3 o'clock in the morning. In passing down an alley in the rear of the Rue Morgue, the fugitive's attention was arrested by a light gleaming from the open window of Madame L'Espagne's chamber in the fourth story of her house. Rushing to the building, it perceived the lightning rod, clambered up with inconceivable agility, grasped the shutter, which was thrown fully back against the wall, and by its means swung itself directly upon the headboard of the bed. There you go. The whole feat did not occupy a minute. The shutter was kicked open again by the orangutan as it entered the room. Oh my gracious. Oh my gracious. Okay, we're almost done. Okay. The sailor, in the meantime, was both rejoiced and perplexed. He had strong hopes of now recapturing the brute, as it could scarcely escape from the trap into which it had ventured, except by the rod, where it might be intercepted as it came down. On the other hand, there was much cause for anxiety as to what it might do in the house. Yeah, it's in a house it doesn't know, with people it doesn't know. This latter reflection urged the man still to follow the fugitive. A lightning rod is ascended without difficulty, especially by a sailor. But when he had arrived as high as the window, which lay far to his left, his career was stopped. The most that he could accomplish was to reach over so as to obtain a glimpse of the interior of the room. At this glimpse, he nearly fell from his hold through the excess of horror. Now it was that those hideous shrieks arose upon the night, which had startled from slumber the inmates of the Rue Morgue. Madame L'Espagne and her daughter, habited in their nightclothes, had apparently been occupied in arranging some papers in the iron chest already mentioned, which had been wheeled into the middle of the room. It was open, and its contents lay beside it on the floor. The victims must have been sitting with their backs toward the window, and from the time elapsing between the ingress of the beast and the screams, it seems probable that it was not immediately perceived. Oh. The flapping to of the shutter would naturally have been attributed to the wind. Yeah. Oh. Oh, okay. Here's where it gets like, take a moment if you need to. Grab a drink before we sing this little song at the end. Oh, okay. As the sailor looked in, the gigantic animal had seized Madame L'Espagne by the hair, which was loose as she had been combing it, and was flourishing the razor about her face in imitation of the motions of a barber. The daughter lay prostrate and motionless. She had swooned. The screams and struggles of the old lady, during which the hair was torn from her head, had the effect of changing the probably pacific purposes of the orangutan into those of wrath. With one determined sweep of its muscular arm, it nearly severed her head from her body. The sight of blood inflamed its anger into frenzy. Gnashing its teeth and flashing fire from its eyes, it flew upon the body of the girl and embedded its fearful talons in her throat, retaining its grasp until she expired. Its wandering and wild glances fell at this moment upon the head of the bed, over which the face of its master, rigid with horror, was just discernible. The fury of the beast, who no doubt bore still in mind the dreaded whip, was instantly converted into fear. Conscious of having deserved punishment, it seemed desirous of concealing its bloody deeds, and skipped about the chambers in an agony of nervous agitation, throwing down and breaking the furniture as it moved, and dragging the bed from the bedstead. Oh, like a little kid. In conclusion, it seized first the corpse of the daughter and thrust it up the chimney as it was found, then that of the old lady, which it immediately hurled through the window headlong. As the ape approached the casement with its mutilated burden, the sailor shrank aghast to the rod, and rather gliding than clambering down it, hurried at once home, dreading the consequences of the butchery, and gladly abandoning, in his terror, all solicitude about the fate of the orangutan. The words heard by the party upon the staircase were the Frenchman's exclamations of horror and affright, commingled with the fiendish jabberings of the brute. I have scarcely anything to add. The orangutan must have escaped from the chamber by the rod just before the break of the door. It must have closed the window as it passed through it. It was subsequently caught by the owner himself, who obtained for it a very large sum at the Jardin des Plantes. The bond was instantly released upon our narration of the circumstances, with some comments from Dupin at the bureau of the prefect of police. This functionary, however well disposed to my friend, could not altogether conceal his chagrin at the turn which affairs had taken, and was fain to indulge in a sarcasm or two about the propriety of every person minding his own business. Let him talk, said Dupin, who had not thought it necessary to reply. Let him discourse, it will ease his conscience. I am satisfied with having defeated him in his own castle. Nevertheless, that he failed in the solution of this mystery is by no means the matter for wonder which he supposes it. For, in truth, our friend the prefect is somewhat too cunning to be profound. In his wisdom is no stamen. It is all head and no body, like the pictures of the goddess Laverna, or at best all head and shoulders like a codfish. But he is a good creature after all. I like him especially for one master stroke of cant, by which he has attained his reputation for ingenuity. I mean the way he has we're going to toss my French. I mean the way he has denier équier et d'expliquer ce qui n'est pas. I don't know what that means. I apologize, but it is French, and that was close. It was close. But yeah, so that is the end of the story. So it was just a giant orangutan all along. Oh, I can't imagine being in such a time that you wouldn't even know what the animal is. Like that it's a real thing, let alone like if it jumped in your house. Complete monkey business. I like that. I like that, Matthew. We went over. We've gone over by 20 minutes. And according to my... Dang it! We're up to 10 people. All right. Oh, we lost 3. Okay, so 3 people were like, oh, hell no, we are not listening to Katie sing. Okay, so I did remember part of it last week. I was right. But I found the post again. It popped up today. Okay, are you guys ready? Are you ready? Heavy listening, are you still here? I know you want it. Ugh. You know you're gonna owe me a wedding at the Dolly Parton thing, the best friend wedding, right? Because this is one of her songs. But okay, okay. Now I'm just rambling to avoid doing this. Okay, ready? Okay, here we go. Okay. Okay. Working 9 to 9 for a man whose eye is creepy. That's why I decide to assault him when he's sleepy. But his heart still beats in the floorboards where I set it. It's enough to drive me crazy if I let it. So, if somebody would like to come up, with more lyrics, there you go. I would love to marry you too. I need a best friend forever shirt with you. I want to be ridiculous. Because I could be ridiculous with you. You're the best. But okay. There we go. I've officially sung more than 3 seconds on this channel now. And I love you guys so much. Thank you for being here with me. Oh, next week is we start Charles Dickens. So that's gonna be fun. That is gonna be, I don't know about more lyrics for that, but almost all. Oh, is that true? Okay, sorry. Thinking about that, I might have to try that. Oh, I hope that's true too. Okay, so if somebody has a favorite Emily Dickinson poem, send it to me. Otherwise, I'm just gonna look one up, and we may try that for next week. But I am not singing every week, guys. That's a lie. If I know it or can learn it, I'll sing for you guys. Anywho, I love you guys so much. I will see you tomorrow night on the other channel, KT 3.14. KT 3.14. Karen, I think, is the only one who has subscribed to the second channel. So check that out. We're going to be snarky. We're going to do some more Am I the Assholes? So, yeah. And then we got Cozy Coven, 9 o'clock tomorrow night. Working on a new TV show. I'm really excited to help with some character development for that. So, you guys just do all the likes, subscribe, shares. Please, please, please share. And yeah, folks, just subscribe because we've hit a bit of a plateau on subscribers. But I am so grateful that you guys are here. And I don't know where my thing is. And there we go. But yeah, I am so grateful to see you guys every week. And I will talk to you next week or see you tomorrow or I'll see you. Get a hold of me. I love you.